Hey, everybody. Welcome to our weekly debrief. This is our weekly deep breath when it comes to the news. Smarter news, as you know, is all about quick, concise, nonpartisan information, but sometimes we just got to talk. And we need to have a conversation today about some of the big stories that you are most interested in this week. That's what's going to drive this entire report today. And I'm really excited about it. You really chose some very interesting stories. I was a little bit worried. You know, news delivery is all about how you can organize information so that we can all better consume it. It's a very chaotic world. You've got a lot going on. So I like to look for little connections or similar themes to try to organize our conversations so they seem less chaotic and also help us digest the information a little bit better. It's one of my favorite things to do. I could be flying my nerd flag when it comes to that, but let me just fly it proud because I am a little bit of a nerd when it comes to the news. A little bit might be an understatement. I like to take these stories that seem really different and put them down on paper and think about how do they connect? What is the collage that it can create that makes sense of what sometimes doesn't make sense at all when you first look at it? And I was a little bit worried about this. And then suddenly the theme surfaced. And the theme that all these stories have in common is that the term political stunt has been used for each and every one of them. Now, political stunt is a little bit of a derogatory term. I was thinking about this. It's sort of like when my kids call each other dumb. You know, you're dumb. It's like, you know what that means? It's not good. But the context in which it is being used really matters. It really gives you an idea of like, well, it's kind of like a cheap term, right? Something can be a political stunt. You know, that's not good, but in what way it's being used really matters. And in all of these stories, the way that this term is being used really matters and gives us sort of a deeper meaning or some more things to think about related to these stories. So the first one we're going to talk about today is out of New York City. It's a story I did not see coming, but it is a story so many reacted to online. So let me just describe what happened to you. This could be described as a political stunt. I say could, I like to hedge it because as a journalist, I don't think it's appropriate to call things as a fact a political stunt, but this was a media event that was put on by politicians and the press was invited and set up just in the right way to get the perfect shot of what seemed to be sort of an unbelievable scene. So just imagine this if you don't have a video in front of you. You're seeing the mayor of New York City, the police commissioner, the Freedom Towers in the background, beautiful clear day in New York City. And you got all these dirt bikes lined up just in front of the cameras, nearly 100 of them. Dirt bikes are illegal in New York City. For anyone that's lived in New York City, you know, every once in a while, you get a couple guys driving down the streets and they're dirt bikes, loud, fast, seems a little dangerous. And it's illegal. It's illegal in New York City. And so one of the things that the New York City mayor and the police commissioner have been trying to do is crack down on this. Okay. So what they say in order to send a message is take a bulldozer and drive. I can't believe I'm saying this out loud. Take a bulldozer and drive it right over the top of these nearly 100 bikes. And the bulldozer goes back and forth right over the top of them, completely destroys them. And again, New York leadership says, we're going to send a message on this. We're not tolerating this anymore. If this happens, your bike is going to be taken. It's going to be destroyed. Capiche? That's the end. Capiche is me paraphrasing it, but I think you get the point. So many of you had reactions to this online saying, wait a minute, well, it seems so wasteful. By the way, the New York City mayor said all the bikes are going to be recycled for what it's worth. But Stephanie brought up a good point on our Instagram account. She said, well, why not sell these bikes? I mean, you could sell these bikes and actually make a little bit of money. That was an interesting point, I thought. Many of you thought, why are they doing this when there seems to be so many more important things to handle in a city like New York City, especially when it comes to crime? And so this got me thinking. There has been a lot of conversation and debate about correct policing in any major city, but specifically in New York City. And over the years, different concepts have come up. One of the concepts that came up really talked about related to the 1980s in New York City, when New York City was a really dangerous city, is this idea of broken window policing. And the whole idea behind it is that you really have to crack down on minor infractions. You got to fix the things that are really visible. So broken windows, graffiti, trash on the streets. You go after minor infractions, people jump in turnstiles and you arrest them and you show that you're not going to tolerate this sort of behavior and you create an environment that is less friendly to crime. And that helps turn the tide. It was something that Malcolm Gladwell talked about in his book called The Tipping Point. If you haven't read it, it's fascinating. Although I just, in preparation for this report, saw a interview that Malcolm Gladwell did a couple of years after he wrote the book, where he said he felt that maybe he overplayed his hand describing this as a major reason for why New York City cleaned up broken window policing, because he said maybe it's more nuanced than he first or others first described. You also have critics of this policy that say it really targets, low income or minority communities. And it's controversial in that way, because are you really doing broken window policing, or are you really focused on certain communities, and are those communities unfairly targeted? So there's a lot of debate about this, and I think you should know that. But it got me as soon as I saw this, and as soon as that term could even come to mind, it's like, this is a little bit of a stunt. It's a little bit of it's a media event for sure, but is it a stunt? Like, what is the reason behind this? That's instantly what I thought about, because it was such a show of force on what could be described as a relatively minor infraction in the grand scheme of things. So I wanted to find out, well, what is crime like in New York City? I mean, maybe they really have to go after dirt bikes. Maybe crime is different than we think in the city. We've seen different reports or headlines or different data maybe suggesting that crime is up in big cities, but like, what's the truth? So I found this from the New York Police Department. It's a release from early June, so just a couple of weeks ago. And so the headline on this, again, got to be aware of the headlines and look a little deeper. The headline on this press release is NYPD announces citywide crime statistics for May 2022. And the headline of this, the lead line is, for the month of May, the number of overall shooting incidents again declined in New York City compared with May of last year. So year over year, shooting incidents are down. And in fact, it seems pretty impressive. Citywide shooting incidents decreased by 31%, marked a decline. Hate crimes are also down. So then you go a little bit further into it and you see something different. And that is overall index crime in New York City increased by nearly 28%. So what does that mean, the overall index crime? If the shooting incidents are down, that must be good, right? Well, let's take a look. If you look at the statistics, again, May of this year compared to May of last year, let me just read them to you. Murder is up in New York City nearly 10%. Rape is up nearly 38%. Robbery is up 26%. Felony assault is up nearly 13%. Burglary up 28%. Grand larceny up 42%. Grand larceny auto up 16%. Total overall crime in New York City is up nearly 28%. So for those of you who are asking that question, well, doesn't New York City have bigger problems? The statistics that the NYPD put out themselves show that they do. They do have bigger problems. Murder, rape, robbery, all up. Shooting incidents down. But murder, rape, robbery, burglary, grand arson, all the big crimes, if you will, are all up. So this is why I bring up this idea of broken windows policing, because I wonder, again, very controversial concept. If you look it up, you'll see a lot of debate about it. But I couldn't help but think, number one, this was a very effective media event. When I saw this video, I thought, oh, I got to share this with Smarter News. It's, again, sort of an unbelievable scene. But it got me thinking, is this what leadership in New York City, is this part of it? Is this idea of going after smaller infractions, showing a serious crackdown that's going to get a lot of press, sending a message that could cause a cascading effect on other crime? Highly debated. I'll leave that to you, but just something to think about. So that's our first story, where political stunt is being used. A lot of when you look at danger in New York City and leadership in New York City from the 1980s to the 1990s, early 2000s, obviously the name Rudy Giuliani comes up, which is a name also in our next story, because we're going to talk a little bit about the House Select Committee investigating January 6th and the hearings that we're seeing. As I'm recording this right now, there's another hearing taking place. And in the course of the lead up to this hearing, as well as it's gone on, this term political stunt has been used. Republicans have criticized Democrats, saying that this is a political stunt that they're putting on, and that this should be disregarded as just politically motivated, not actually looking for the truth as to what happened on January 6th. Of course, Democrats may not use the term political stunt for Republicans, but they're saying that Republicans are also pushing their own political agenda here and not participating in these hearings. That's a little bit of let's work through that for a second. Covering these hearings has been very difficult. And I was trying to figure out, what is the challenge behind it? The sheer volume of information is a lot. for someone like me that's a really small team, hours and hours of testimony and research and documents. I just want to pull out 1 to 3 minutes for you on a regular basis. And in order to do that, I usually have to watch the whole thing and then figure out, well, what's the marrow, what's really the good stuff that if you only have 3 minutes, this is what you should see. And the sheer volume and the pace of this has been difficult to keep up with. Usually though, in a hearing, even if it is long, you'll have Republicans and Democrats questioning the same person, and you'll see the themes from different parties that they're trying to hit. And so if you notice in previous videos that I make highlight videos on hearings, what I'll do is I try to evenly divide between Republicans and Democrats, even in time. If I give 90 seconds to Republicans, I'll give 90 seconds to Democrats. So you get equal footing from each party as to how they approach this certain topic. And I can't do that here, because the way that the hearings are being done, there's a limited number of Republicans. Those Republicans agree with the Democrats essentially so far on the panel. And there's usually one lawmaker questioning the guests or the witnesses of the day. So there's not a lot of back and forth between different lawmakers for different perspectives. And it's almost like a presentation rather than hearing, because you're not seeing a lot of different angles, but that is also a matter of choice. So you do have 2 Republicans that are sitting on the House Select Committee. And typically what happens is for a House Select Committee, you'll have each party be able to sort of place who they'd like to be part of the committee. Now, let's rewind back in time. You have House Speaker Pelosi ultimately making the decision about the House Select Committee. You had Congressman Kevin McCarthy, who is the highest ranking Republican, make suggestions to Nancy Pelosi. And it's not necessarily suggestions. This is what the Republicans will say, well, these are the people that we would like to see on the committee. And she rejected them, 2 of them initially. And so Congressman McCarthy said, well, I'm withdrawing the rest of them because clearly you don't want a variety of opinions on this. The reason why Nancy Pelosi says that she rejected these suggestions, for lack of a better word, from Kevin McCarthy was that they could actually be, like Congressman Jim Jordan could actually be a witness in the hearing. So there was a conflict of interest. So there's politics involved. There's also choices involved. And one of the reports that the New York Times had today was a question about Republicans behind closed doors questioning about whether or not participating in this hearing in an official capacity was a mistake, because everything that's happening behind closed doors with the committee, how the committee is unveiling all the information, they don't have any insight to. Where if they had some people that they felt were more marching in step with party lines on this particular topic, maybe they would have an idea of what's to come and an understanding of where the committee was heading and the information that the committee was looking at. And so that's a point that I just wanted to pull out, because it's kind of that question of, well, why aren't we seeing more debate about the hearing? Why don't we have more differing of opinions? It's the way that the committee was set up, and you'll have critics of that and also defenders of that. And also the way that the information is being presented, sort of like a presentation rather than a questioning back and forth with all lawmakers involved. That's one of the reasons why hearings take so long. Let's say you have 12 lawmakers and each one of them gets 8 minutes, and everyone has to be a bathroom break and a lunch break. And then, there's 3 rounds of questions, and this is why it takes a long time, but this is set up a little bit different. And so I just want to point that out. One of the other things I just also feel like is important to mention now too, is we're looking for what are the key takeaways so far from these hearings. And one of the things that keeps on coming up is this idea of evidence or of voter fraud. And this came up this week because you had election officials in the state of Georgia, but also a lawmaker in Arizona talk about how the team at the White House for President Trump at the time said that they had evidence, they had names, they had evidence of voter fraud, but that evidence was never shown. And I'm really curious to learn more about this, because over the last year, this has been a repeated drumbeat about there's evidence, you can see it for yourself that there's a problem, but we actually have evidence, but the evidence was never shown. And what I'm really curious, because all of this keeps on going back to Rudy Giuliani for the most part, of him saying, we have the evidence. My team has the evidence. I'm curious who saw that evidence. I'm not in a position to say that the evidence didn't exist because I've never asked Mayor Giuliani about that. Probably should, by the way. That would be appropriate conversation. I'm just curious if it ever existed. And we have nobody that's come forward. I know there's a lot of strong feelings about what's happening in voting in America right now. And for those who love President Trump, there's a certain kind of framework for thinking about what happened January 6th and it happened during the elections. For those that didn't like President Trump, there's a certain framework. There's very few people that are kind of in the middle that are still like, like what to make of this? There's been repeatedly reference to evidence. Did the evidence just will we ever see evidence? Did evidence ever exist? Is there anything real? Was it all a mirage? And if it was all a mirage, that in and of itself would be startling. But you always find something, even in any story. There's always that one email, that one phone call, that one paper trail, that one thing where there's a list of names or a list of numbers or a list of something, or this is what we're going to say, even though we don't have this information yet. And remember, for the lawmakers that were trying to pause certifying the election results on January 6th, they were asking for a 10-day audit of the election. And that seemed to, again, be a repeat from the White House. Just give us more time. Let the courts figure it out. We have the evidence. The evidence is coming. We can't share it right now, but we have the evidence, or I'm going to give it to you, but I never gave it to you. It was that call for more time. So will we ever find out what was the evidence, even if it wasn't real? And that's what I'm curious about. So I don't know if we'll get to the bottom of it. But if there's a complete absence of information, that would be notable too. Was it just an idea? Or was there actually something to look at, but then no one's seeing? You see where I'm going with this. I want to know the goods, like what's actually there. And without it, we just have to, just to be responsible as a journalist, I have to just kind of tell you what we now know, which is that these lawmakers or decision makers in local elections were told that there would be evidence coming. They didn't receive any of it. This is why they didn't follow along with the White House request to decertify election results or pause the election further. President Trump denies these sort of allegations about in the description of what even transpired during that time. And all we can really say right now is those are the two sides. And so I wonder what else we're going to learn on that. So I'm going to be watching more on that. Okay, final term of political stunt. So political stunt has been a term related to the gas tax holiday. And what's interesting about this term, political stunt, is we talked about, for example, House Select Committee on January 6th, you have Republicans calling Democrats political stunt. You have, politics that you have all this accusations back and forth. When it comes to the gas tax holiday, there is bipartisan agreement about a gas tax holiday being a potential political stunt. And it's coming not just from lawmakers themselves that are currently elected officials. Let me grab this. I have a couple quotes. This is from the Wall Street Journal. This is in reaction. This was right before President Biden proposed this week of a federal gas tax holiday. So Senator Kevin Cramer, who's a Republican of North Dakota, said in a statement, suspending the gas tax is nothing more than a knee-jerk political stunt, providing minimal relief while blowing a hole in our infrastructure funding. You also had Senator Todd Young of Indiana, Republican, saying President Biden's proposal is like applying a Band-Aid to a gaping wound. There's this reference to this being a political stunt, but there's also a reference of it being a gimmick. And that term gimmick is a term that was used by the former economic advisor, very famous economist, Larry Summers, who advised President Barack Obama. Jason Furman, who also was an economic advisor for President Obama, said this about the gas tax holiday. President Obama actually used the term gimmick too. He said most of the 18.4 cent reduction, this is Jason Furman, most of the 18.4 cent reduction would be pocketed by industry with maybe a few cents passed on to the consumer. So why are people calling this a political stunt? Why? Well, it has to do with the timing. It's before the July 4th holiday. We know everyone's hitting the road. So if the White House is seen as advocating to give consumers a little bit of a break ahead of this holiday, the timing would matter. The president's asking for 3 months, which gets him right kind of above, before the midterm elections. Remember, the president is proposing this, but Congress has to go along with it, which is why I think it's interesting to see both Democrats and Republicans come out with a little bit of a wary eyebrow raise on this. You're not getting Democrats coming out and being like, this is so great, we can't wait to get behind this and vote for this in the House of Representatives or the Senate. You're not seeing that at all. And you're seeing it a little bit for people that are in tight races in Congress, for example, but you're not seeing that overwhelming, oh, we're going to get this on the floor and we're going to vote on this and we're going to get consumers a break when it comes to the federal gas tax. That's not necessarily what you're seeing, because there's a question about minimal benefit and the perception that it looks like a kind of a political stunt, even for consumers, that the timing of this and how it's being done doesn't just raise the eyebrow of politicians and economists, but also for your everyday consumer that's like, wait a minute, is this really going to help me? And by the way, are you just doing this because there's an election coming up? And here's the other kind of the flip side to all of this as well, just taking some of the politics aside. One of the reasons you see higher prices for gas has to do with supply and demand. You don't have enough supply, you have high demand, prices go up. So if you have a little bit of a lower price of gas, the question is, does that mean the price goes up because people are going to demand, they're going to be more, it's going to be a little bit easier to go and fill up your tank. You're not going to be thinking as much about it. Demand's going to go up and the prices are going to go up. And so it kind of cancels itself out. That's some of the thinking behind it. So we'll see what happens to this proposal. One of the things that President Biden talked about is states also having sort of a state gas tax holiday. That could be a really big deal in a state like California. Patrick DeHaan of Gas Buddy, a leading analyst when it comes to petroleum, any issues related to petroleum in the United States, said, hey, if states end up doing this too, you could see a break. I mean, in the state of California, if you suspend the state tax and the federal tax, you could see almost $1 down for gasoline. But in other states, it wouldn't make that much of a difference. And so the question then overall is whether or not how much the government can really impact what the price that you're paying at the pump ultimately. So what does this mean for a recession? That's a question a lot of you have asked as well. One of the things that has come up in this time period, no one wants to see higher gas prices, but right now the gas prices in and of themselves, even though we hit that record amount of above $5 a gallon on a national average, maybe higher for you, maybe lower for you. That's what we had just recently. It hasn't necessarily turned off spending. What economists are seeing is consumers making choices. So being a little bit more thoughtful about how they're spending their money. But the fact that we're still spending our money and keeping up spending our money is not panicking economists right now. For a period where we saw higher gas prices and we were in a recession and we're in a financial crisis, let's say 2008, 2009, part of the issue with that is that nobody had any savings. Everyone was living on credit and it was a big problem, right? That is like turning off the nozzle, right? It's just everything stopped. We're not seeing that in part because one of the strange silver linings from the pandemic, I don't know. I don't even like saying a silver lining for a pandemic. Oof. But just go with me on this for a second, is that we were able to save money, that one of the things that Americans did during this time is pay down debt and also save. And so we have some savings, and that's better going into an uncertain economic environment than if we didn't. And so again, that's what's giving economists a little bit like, okay, we're going to see what happens here with gas prices. If gas prices go up to $6 in national average, bets off. But right now, some economists say we could even absorb the cost going up to $5.50. Maybe. We'll see. So we'll be watching for that. We'll see if Congress moves on that at all. But pretty soon, guys, I mean, once we get to the July 4th holiday, after that, you're getting Congress can be in session, but you're going to have a big recess before the end of summer. You're going to have a lot of people in the House of Representatives. Everyone's up for election, so they're going to be campaigning. So it gets more difficult to do things. And there's been an opportunity for lawmakers to try to pass something related to a gas tax holiday, and they haven't done it so far. So we'll see what happens. Okay. So 3 different stories, allegations of political stunts flying, flying everywhere. And I'll be curious your thoughts on this and what you think actually does qualify as a political stunt and what maybe isn't at all. And maybe does that term even work? There's always politics at play. There's always politics at play. So whether something is officially a stunt or not, I guess is really the question. Political stunt. Keep your suggestions coming for stories. If you have any questions for us, we love hearing from you. So questions and comments, as always, let me know. And there will be always more on smarternews.com. Have a great day, and I'll talk to you soon. Quick, concise, nonpartisan, Smarter News, a refuge from the storm. I'm Jenna. Thank you for choosing smarter.